it's a pretty salty group of people at times. The language and the way we communicate is not appropriate. Feelings definitely get hurt. It's a risky business. Time is the thing that kind of sucks us dry. Probably the most common thing is they rush, or they rush some facet of the project. So they rush the design, or they rush procurement, or they get a permit and they're anxious to start, but they get a permit and they haven't given their contractor enough time to procure their trade partners and procure material or procure kitchen equipment. Or they get their contractor on board while the drawings are in for review for permit at the city, and then say permit comes back approved on a Wednesday and they're anxious to start on a Thursday or a Friday. And it takes time. Like, we can't be on standby. I mean, we can be, but that's not fair fiscally to anybody. But patience is probably the biggest mistake and the biggest challenge that I see people facing. So they're wanting to rush some amount of it, and I think it's the excitement, and I understand it. Like, hey, they have a new space, they have a new concept, they have a new location that they want to open, and that's great, and I'm glad and happy to be part of it. But sometimes it just takes a little bit extra time to understand the schedules and the sequencing of the things. Like, we can start pretty quickly, but maybe we don't start in full force is the problem. Like, okay, hey, we're getting started, but we don't have contracts in place quite yet, or I'm scrambling to capture insurance, and it construction can be chaotic, but trying to minimize chaos is good. I'd like to keep it to a minimum, and I think that's probably the biggest thing is rush out of excitement, or rushing because they have a lease that's going to start and it's expensive. But that's probably the biggest mistake that I see is people rush, and then on our side of things and our trade partner side of things, when we get rushed, what might feel like procrastination kind of comes about, where if you give me a week minimum, but 2 weeks is better, I can write all the contracts, I can get all the scopes, I can get everybody in place and going. But the early trades on a job, like a demo subcontractor, a lot of GCs will invite people they've never worked with, or 10 or 15 demo contractors, and we don't do that. There's a few that we work with over and over again, and so we're able to stay in touch with them about what their workload looks like and how much manpower they have. And frankly, sometimes when we're rushed, the decision on who we use is dependent on what day we get the notice to proceed and how quickly we need to go. Because the contractor that we intended to use might be 2 weeks out, but the one that was our second choice could start a week sooner. And if that's really important to them, then we're able to do stuff like that. But I think that's because we use a smaller pool of subcontractors that we're close with, and we stay in touch with them and communicate through that process. But it does add complexity and adds challenges, much more than it probably sounds like right now. I would say for me, or for us, they're not related. The most underestimated cost, no, they are related. So I would say for us, they are actually related, and the most underestimated cost is I like to go above and beyond what's required and what's needed. And so there's always stuff on projects, and I don't care if it's like it's your first restaurant, or if you're a corporation and this is your 100th restaurant or 500th restaurant. things fit into a space, they're not quite how you want them, you need extra storage space, you need this, you need that, you need to change all these things. And I think realistically there's probably a good couple weeks towards the end, 2 or 3 weeks towards the end of a project, that you really need to get the operator of the restaurant, whether that's a manager that's been hired or the owners that are operating, whoever it is, to be in the space and going, functionally I need this different. Because even though it's similar to other locations, I think it's good to get someone in there to feel how they're going to work through the space and then make those changes. And cost wise, I'm pretty bad about capturing that, because I kind of roll it into the punch list time period. But there's times where we have multiple people working for 2 or 3 weeks just doing extra stuff, taking this down, replacing this, adding new equipment, changing things that aren't on the drawings. And you could capture the cost on that, but to me it feels like kind of petty little things. And at the frantic pace at which a punch list and a closeout phase goes, it's kind of challenging, I think, to capture that. I think that there's other ways to do it, and I haven't figured out a good way. I think I lean into heavily customer service and trying to make the client super happy. Ultimately, it works out for us, and we have repeat clients, and so maybe that's a good thing. We have people who hire us to come back, and maybe they're seeing how we finish a job, and that we get towards the end and we are on schedule, and when they have extra things, we're taking care of it, not causing issues and not slowing it down. But I would say I underestimate that at times, and maybe that's good. Maybe that's why we're successful getting repeat clients. But it does take time and it does take money. Putting people on projects every day is pretty expensive. Man, I don't know if I can come up with 3, but I can come up with one really important one, and you need a really good design team. There's plenty of architects and plenty of engineers out there in the world, but a really good one that understands the jurisdiction that's reviewing the drawings, has experience in the jurisdiction reviewing the drawings, and gets together a complete set. That helps a ton. It can be challenging getting through some of these jurisdictions. Some are easier than others, but having designers that know what's needed and what's required, and understanding codes and all of that, and can put together a thorough set of documents is super important. And then maybe a second thing that a lot of people don't realize is jurisdictions want a contractor on the permit. They want to see who it is, and oftentimes we end up filling out paperwork like, hey, we're awarding you the project, fill this out, I need it today, because it needs to be attached to the permit. And so that's something I think people don't always realize, that you need a licensed contractor on board. Maybe that's not always the case, but it so often is the case that it's almost like we expect it. Like, hey, here's our proposal. 2 or 3 weeks goes by, and then, hey, we're awarding you the job. Can you fill this out right now? And they oftentimes they're asking for that before they even ask about a contractor insurance or anything. So. And that's all driven towards the permit. I like that it's not the same. Like, that every day is a little bit different. Some people like routine, and they like a plan, and they like everything to go just, for this 15 minutes I'm doing this, and this hour I'm doing that. And, we do plan to that extent, but you have to be ready for the chaos, and you have to surround yourself, and you have to build teams that can handle and adapt, and that's what it is. You, I don't know. You have to be ready to change course at a moment's notice and adapt and change your plan to fit what's in front of you. And what's interesting in construction too is there's a lot of people that touch a construction project. I think you'd be surprised at the number of different individuals that work on a project. Even a small tenant improvement, you'll have well over 100 people that ultimately come in and are part of the construction of that project. And it takes a lot to get all those people moving in the same direction, to see the same vision towards the end. And some of them never do see the vision, but they know what their scope is, and they have a goal and a timeline, and they meet that and they move on. And when you have that many people circulating through a space in such a short amount of time, I think you'd be surprised at what it takes to keep everybody motivated and working on the same thing. But I love it. I love that, people come to work and they're happy and they're safe and they have a job to do and they can be productive and efficient and then move on to something else. And then a whole new group of people comes in and has to learn the space and what goes on. I think construction is the epitome of interdependence, because no one can complete their job without everybody else. And everyone kind of thinks about me, but the really successful ones have to think about us and everyone. And I think that's one of the things I like the most. It's constant team building. It's not just the team of the company you work for, but the team of the companies you work with, and learning how to work over and over again with each other. And I love that. So, and then it goes beyond just the trades. It goes into the design teams and the owners and the landlords and the building inspectors and everyone along the way. And it's really cool to see projects develop, and all of those people who have different goals, but they all realize and see the goal of the project and work together and want to help each other. And certainly if you had a certain attitude or treated people a certain way, it would go completely the opposite. But I think I'm fortunate that almost every project I've ever worked on, we have a good relationship with the trades. We have a good relationship with inspectors and landlords, and everybody's willing to help and understand and realize that things change, and we're adapting and we're communicating as soon as possible. And I think one thing that kind of helps that for us too is I will quickly call, and I ask our team to quickly call and say, hey, this came up and it's a problem and I'm working on a solution, but I don't know what it is. And I think the value in that is twofold. I think it shows that we're communicating and we're sincere and we're not trying to hide things, but it also opens up that we're not the ones that have all the answers, and sometimes it takes somebody who's a little bit distanced from the project to go, what about this? And it's a really good idea. So I think that my favorite thing is construction is interdependence, like to the definition. So kind of like we've talked about a little bit, I approach building long-term relationships with clients is honesty and transparency and doing more than I say I'm going to do. Nobody ever likes feeling like they got less than they paid for, or less than they wanted, or like they were chasing answers all the way through. So, we have tools and processes in place that, we are constantly sharing what's going on. We're constantly telling people what's going on, our clients and design partners. And we're not trying to hide anything. We're trying to move forward. We are empathetic with what they're going through. I personally worked 4 years as an owner's rep before starting this company. with really my main focus was I came off of a school bond project. There were 3 schools that were part of a bond, and it was kind of a tough relationship with the client. There were some weird things going on, and I had learned a lot, and I was getting closer to the point of starting the company, and I thought, I think I really should learn this other side of things. And so I spent 4 years learning what owners go through, learning how they deal with architects and how they deal with municipalities and how they deal with their higher ups and how elected officials deal with the voters. And that was really impactful and really helpful for me in learning what one of the other entities, not all of them, but one of the other entities goes through on a project. And I think that carries through to today, where there's decisions that get made that to a lot of people don't make sense, but because I sat in a seat very similar to theirs, I get it, and I get why they might be making that decision. And I think that helps ultimately in them appreciating the work that we do, because it's not just us running over top of them and saying this is the way it is and has to be, period, without understanding what they're going through. We're able to kind of tailor our response and our reaction to issues that I know they go through. I don't know if they'd be surprised or not surprised. It's a pretty salty group of people at times. So the language and the way we communicate is not appropriate for a lot of places. I don't think it's just language, but it's kind of a tough group, and feelings definitely get hurt at times. But I think the point at which, like the jokes that you probably have seen online about how construction people talk to each other and communicate, it's a little bit exaggerated, but not that far. You can be pretty rough with someone and pretty blunt, and it's not taken disrespectfully most of the time. So I think that's probably one of the surprises. And the other thing is it's a risky business. There's a high risk level, and profit margins aren't what people think they are. They're pretty low compared to a lot of industries. It's a game of volume, or a business of volume, and time is the thing that kind of sucks us dry. So those are maybe a few things that people don't realize. I don't know if that's a good answer or a good way to phrase any of that, but maybe that's my answer.